There are wounds that do not bleed, scars that live not on the skin but within the silence of your spirit. You don't always scream when you're in pain. Sometimes you just breathe quieter. And often, that silence speaks louder than any cry for help. You didn't ask for war. You didn't welcome destruction. You didn't light the fire. Yet you were the one left trembling in the ruins of everything that once gave you peace. Why? Because someone made it their mission to introduce chaos into your calm. Not for justice, not for correction, but for control. And what they couldn't control, they tried to crush. Let's be honest. There is a certain kind of evil that doesn't scream or shout. It's not loud and violent. It's subtle, calculated. It hides behind concern while planting seeds of disorder. It calls its sabotage love, its manipulation protection, and its envy truth. And, though you knew the difference, you stayed silent. Not because you were weak, but because you hoped they would change. You prayed they would see the damage before they destroyed everything, but instead of softening, they sharpened the blade. Now the question lingers in your soul like a storm, refusing to move on. Why would God allow them to get away with this? Why is their life still standing while yours seems to have collapsed? But here's the thing about divine justice. It is not noisy. It doesn't make grand announcements or parade vengeance through the streets. It doesn't return fire with fire. God's justice works in quiet collapse. What looks like peace in their life today is merely a delay before the fall. And therefore, when it comes, will not be obvious to the world, but it will be devastating to their soul. For every sleepless night you endured, there is a silence building around their success. For every lie they told to stain your name, there is a truth waiting to erode their foundation. For every moment they watched you break and felt nothing, there is a moment coming when they'll break and find no one beside them. There is a divine irony to how God operates. Those who orchestrate chaos often find themselves swallowed by it, not in public spectacle, but in a quiet undoing. No applause, no warning, no rescue. They believed themselves to be the architects of your ruin, but God saw it all, every whisper behind your back, every scheme disguised as concern, every betrayal hidden beneath a smile. And He did not forget. You were not abandoned in your suffering. You were protected while they dug their own pit. You were held in the quiet while they dance in the spotlight. But light fades, and when it does, what they buried in secret will rise again. Not to shame you, but to silence them. Do not believe that because they seem happy, they are free. God has a way of letting people climb high, only so their fall will teach them humility. And when that collapse comes, it will not be loud, it will not be public, it will be spiritual, emotional, internal, and it will be irreversible unless they repent. So breathe, dear soul. Your chaos was not the end of your story, it was the beginning of theirs. You were broken, yes, but not forsaken. You were shattered, but also reshaped. And the same hands that allowed you to fall are the hands now lifting you with quiet strength. Let God be the author of your justice, not with thunder, but with silence. Not with drama, but with divine precision. Because sometimes the loudest justice is the one no one sees. A quiet collapse of everything built on lies. God's justice is not delayed, it's deliberate. We live in a world obsessed with immediacy. We expect answers in seconds, justice in moments, and outcomes in real time. But divine justice doesn't follow human deadlines. It is not impatient. It is not driven by outrage. It is guided by something much deeper, eternal timing. And to the one who has suffered, this can feel excruciating. You look around and wonder, why hasn't God done anything yet? Why are they thriving while I'm drowning in what they caused? But that question comes from a limited lens. God doesn't rush because he doesn't miss. While we scream for swift justice, he is preparing perfect justice, and perfect justice takes time. Because it doesn't just address what happened, it exposes why it happened, how it happened, and who people truly are beneath the masks they wear. There is a strange kind of silence in heaven when evil is loud on earth. Not because God is indifferent, but because he's allowing evil to build its own gallows. Like Haman in the story of Esther, those who plot harm against the innocent often hang by their own devices, not because God needed to crush them, but because he gave them rope and they kept pulling. The very chaos they threw at others becomes the weight that pulls them under. We are conditioned to think justice means exposure, punishment, humiliation, but the justice of God is far more poetic. He lets the wicked build their empires, climb their ladders, decorate their thrones, only for those things to crumble from within, not through outside force, but through inner decay, a rot that no one sees until the walls fall in. This is why you must not be fooled by appearances. Just because someone looks untouched doesn't mean they are unharmed. You might think they escaped consequences, but in truth, they are walking into a storm they can't see coming. Because God does not ignore injustice. He weighs it, measures it, and when the scale tips, it's irreversible. So if it feels like nothing is happening, remember, it's not nothing, it's silence. And in that silence, God is preparing something only he can orchestrate. A collapse that will come not from revenge, but from righteousness. He waits not because he's late, but because his hand doesn't move without eternal purpose. You may be crying now, but the clock of heaven is ticking, and when it strikes, nothing they built will stand. They planted chaos to feel powerful, but it became their weakness. Some people don't create storms accidentally. They design them. They orchestrate disorder not because they are lost, but because it gives them a feeling of control. There is something in them that thrives when others are unraveling. They don't just hurt you out of confusion. They hurt you with calculation. They knew what they were doing when they lied, when they stirred the pot, when they set fire to your peace and blamed you for the smoke. Why? Because chaos gives them attention. It puts them at the center of everyone's focus, and as long as your life is spinning, they feel strong. They believe that if they can disrupt your mind, they can dominate your life. It's a twisted power, but one they depend on deeply, because deep down, without that chaos, they are empty. The storm is not just something they create, it's something they hide behind. But what they never consider is that chaos, once unleashed, doesn't obey its master. It turns on its creator. What was once a weapon becomes a trap. Because when you build your strength on someone else's destruction, you are building on sand. And no structure, no matter how beautifully masked, can survive on sinking ground. You see, in trying to destroy your peace, they gave away their own. The energy they used to sabotage you is now the very energy that they are unraveling them from within. At first, they may seem proud of the damage they caused. They might laugh about your fall, find satisfaction in your tears, feel triumphant when your world cracks open. But chaos does not stay confined to one house. It spreads, and when it returns, it does not knock gently. God allows people to reveal themselves not through confession but through the fruit of their choices. And the fruit of planting chaos is never peace. It may sprout in applause or approval for a season, but it ends in barrenness, because no seed of destruction produces a harvest of joy. Eventually they will taste what they sowed, not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves the moment they made your pain their pleasure. So if you're still watching them live as if nothing happened, wait. The silence around their life is not peace. It is the calm before the inevitable. And when it comes, it won't require drama. Just a quiet collapse of everything they built to feel powerful, as their weakness finally has nowhere left to hide. Your silence was not surrender, it was strength under divine restraint. They mistook your silence as weakness. They saw your lack of retaliation as surrender, but what they never understood was that silence is not always the absence of power, it is often the mark of it. You could have exposed them. You could have fought back with rage, told the truth, gathered your defense, rallied the crowd, but instead you chose to walk away quietly, to retreat, to breathe when every part of you wanted to roar. That was not fear, that was divine restraint. To the ordinary eye, silence looks like defeat. It looks like giving up. But to the spiritually discerning, silence in the face of cruelty is a holy act of trust. It says, I don't need to be louder than their lies. I trust that God hears the unspoken. And there is deep courage in trusting what cannot be seen. It means you're not acting from ego. You're not fighting just to win an argument. You're choosing a battlefield where God leads, not where emotion drags. They wanted your reaction because your reaction would have made them feel justified. It would have given them something to point at, something to twist, something to use as proof that you were the problem. Your silence robbed them of that weapon. It disarmed them. It left them battling with a ghost they could not provoke. And in the quiet of your pain, something else began to happen. You started hearing God more clearly. Without the noise of drama and confrontation, you learned to listen, not to them, but to Him. In stillness, you found direction. While they screamed for chaos, heaven whispered strength. And that strength didn't roar. It endured. It built. It healed. Slowly but surely, it restored your footing. People often misunderstand the spiritual armor of silence. They think power only wears a sword, but sometimes power wears tears. It walks away when it could destroy. It holds its peace when it could make a scene. And that kind of power is the hardest to carry, because no one applauds you for it. No one sees it but God. But He does see. And what He sees, He rewards. Your silence became your shield. Your restraint became your altar. And what you held back from doing, God took note of. Every insult you didn't return, every betrayal you chose not to broadcast, every moment you bit your tongue and bowed your head, it's written in heaven as strength. Not the strength of this world, but the kind that heaven defends and hell fears. So let them think you were weak. Let them believe they won, because in the stillness of your soul, you chose something they could never understand, to be right with God, rather than be loud to man. And in the end, that kind of strength is the one that never collapses. The peace they enjoy is not a reward. It's the silence before the fall. It's a strange thing to watch people who wronged you appear to thrive. They post smiles, they take vacations, they make plans, they laugh. And while your soul carries the weight of what they did, they float through life as if untouched by consequence. And this haunts you because it feels like injustice. It looks like reward. But not everything that looks like peace is peace. Not everything that appears stable is safe. Sometimes what you're seeing is not blessing, it's delay, divine delay. Not because God is letting them win, but because God is letting the rope stretch. Not to strangle them, but to test what they've built. And what they've built, if it was built on lies, betrayal, and pride, will not hold. God is not mocked by appearances. He does not hand out peace like prizes in a contest. His peace is a fruit grown from truth, humility, and righteousness. And if none of those things exist in their foundation, then what you see is not peace. It is only quietness. And quietness before divine justice is often a sign of what's coming, not what's been secured. There is a biblical principle woven through every act of divine justice. The storm never arrives until the cup is full. And once that cup is full of pride, full of injustice, full of silence over sin, it overflows, not with mercy, but with revelation. What was hidden begins to shake. What was buried starts to rise, and the peace they flaunted begins to collapse. Not with noise, but with cracks that start from within. You must not envy what they appear to have, because what looks like a calm life may be a crumbling heart. Their peace is shallow if it was purchased through your pain. Their smiles are thin if they're painted over guilt. And no matter how hard they try to pretend otherwise, the soul knows when it is not right with God. It may ignore that truth, it may bury it, but it cannot erase it. There will come a time when everything they built without repentance will begin to tremble. Not all at once, not in fire and lightning, but in small, suffocating ways. A relationship that no longer feels genuine, a mind that grows restless, a future that loses color. And it won't be because of your curse. It will be the consequence of what they never confessed. So when you see them at peace, don't assume God forgotten. Assume He's watching. Assume He's allowing space, not for them to prosper, but for them to repent. And if they don't, that peace they enjoy will not carry them forward. It will vanish, quietly, like breath in the cold. And no one will need to announce it, because their soul will know. The fall has begun. God rebuilds the innocent, while the guilty slowly self-destruct. You may feel like you've lost everything, the peace you once knew, the confidence you carried, the relationships that once felt secure. And for a while it may have seemed like those who hurt you walked away untouched, even victorious. But God does not measure strength by who caused the most pain. He measures it by who endured the most and still chose not to become bitter. He rebuilds those who are willing to be remade, not through vengeance, but through quiet restoration. You were never discarded. You were being prepared. When the ground of your life was shattered, you didn't realize that God was clearing away everything false so He could rebuild with what is true. While the guilty held tightly to their fragile thrones built on control and deception, God allowed the collapse of your world so He could lay a new foundation, one not built on others' approval or fragile trust, but on Him. That's the paradox of divine justice. While you were grieving, you were growing. While they were celebrating, they were sealing their fate. Because when someone hurts a pure soul and feels no remorse, they do more than damage another. They corrupt themselves. And that corruption doesn't always show immediately. Sometimes it looks like success, laughter, even strength. But inside, something begins to decay, and that decay grows in silence. You, on the other hand, have been walking through fire, not because you were weak, but because you were chosen to be refined. The lies told about you didn't define you, they revealed them. The betrayal you suffered didn't destroy your worth, it exposed their character. And though the pain was deep, the healing is deeper. You are not who you were before the storm, but what remains of you is unshakable. God is in the business of rebuilding. Not patching over the past, but creating something completely new. And while He rebuilds you, He also allows the guilty to face the fruit of their decisions. They may not feel it now, but the weight of what they did grows heavier over time. The truth has a way of pressing on the soul, especially when it's been buried, and no one can run from that kind of weight forever. There's a strange reversal happening beneath the surface. You, once broken, are being restored with divine care, bit by bit, day by day. They, once boastful, are slowly unraveling beneath the weight of unconfessed wrongs. One is being raised, the other is being revealed, and the difference is this: you brought your pain to God. They buried theirs beneath silence and pride. Let that give you peace, not because they will suffer, but because you will survive. The justice of heaven doesn't just destroy the plans of the wicked, it rebuilds the hearts of the broken. And while the guilty crumble in secret, the innocent rise. Not with noise, but with quiet strength. True justice isn't loud, it echoes in their soul when no one's watching. The world often paints justice as a spectacle, loud, public, and final. It imagines courtroom scenes, public apologies, humiliation before an audience. But God's justice does not need an audience. It doesn't need cameras or crowds. Its greatest weight is not felt in public. It is felt in the soul, in the silence no one else hears. When someone hurts you intentionally and refuses to acknowledge the wrong, they begin a war within themselves. At first, they may silence it with distraction, relationships, achievements, excuses, laughter. But the soul is not so easily fooled. It remembers, it replays, it asks questions in the middle of the night, it reopens wounds at the most unexpected times, because the conscience, no matter how hardened, never sleeps forever. True justice is when the one who hurt you is left alone with the truth of what they did and finds no peace in it, no matter how they try to justify it, no matter how many people they fool. Deep down, they know, and that knowing becomes a quiet storm, not loud enough to be seen by others, but loud enough to drown out their own rest. And the longer they refuse to face it, the louder it becomes. Guilt is not a punishment God sends. It is a mirror He allows. And in that mirror, they will one day see not what they pretended to be, but who they truly became. And they will know, even if no one else does, that they were wrong. Meanwhile, your silence becomes your witness. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to prove anything, because true justice doesn't need words. It needs time, and time always tells the truth. The one who cried in silence will be remembered by heaven. The one who laughed in cruelty will be remembered by their conscience. There is no escape from that kind of justice. You can leave people, you can leave cities, you can delete messages, avoid conversations, change your life. But you cannot outrun your own soul. It follows you, and it speaks when the world grows quiet. That is when justice speaks loudest, not with punishment, but with piercing clarity. So while you're tempted to scream, to tell the world your side of the story, to make them see what was done to you, remember this: what they did will not stay buried, not because you dig it up, but because justice has its own voice, and when it speaks, it won't need your help. It will rise in their soul like a flood they can no longer deny. Let them live their life. Let them post, smile, boast. But trust that justice is not delayed. It's traveling in silence. And when it arrives, it will not knock. It will enter quietly into the deepest part of them, and there it will echo louder than any crowd ever could. You will rise with grace while their plans sink without noise. There's something hauntingly beautiful about the way God lifts the broken, not with noise, not with vengeance, but with grace so quiet, even the ones who tried to bury you don't notice it until you're already standing taller than before. You rise not with thunder, but with peace, not with applause, but with strength, while the very ones who plotted your downfall are left wondering why their plans never bore fruit. They never expected you to survive. In fact, part of them needed you to fail, because your strength challenged their control. Your light irritated their darkness. Your peace threatened their manipulation. So they set traps, spoke against you, twisted truth, confused your surroundings. They stirred chaos in your life because they feared what would happen if you truly stood in your power. But you didn't fall the way they expected. Yes, you broke, but you didn't break beyond repair. Yes, you cried, but you didn't collapse. Yes, you were wounded, but you didn't surrender. And that strength, that invisible resilience, that quiet refusal to be destroyed, it was not your own. It was God within you, guarding what He planted, protecting what was meant to grow beyond their reach. And while you were walking through the storm they created, they were waiting for the moment you'd disappear. But instead, something else disappeared. The power they thought they had, their influence over your emotions, their control over your future, their grip on your identity. All of it vanished as God rebuilt you from the inside out. You see, when someone lives by deception, they require someone to control, someone to weaken, someone to overshadow. They thrive when others stay beneath them, and when you refuse to stay beneath, when you silently chose to heal, to rise, to remain kind, to move forward, they began to lose their footing. Not in public, not dramatically, but subtly, silently, the way a ship slowly takes on water until it sinks beneath the very waves it once thought it could control. There's no satisfaction in watching others crumble, not when your heart is pure, but there is deep peace in knowing you didn't have to play dirty to survive. You didn't have to fight the way they fought. You didn't have to throw stones or speak curses. You just had to trust God. And He did what you couldn't. He turned their schemes into silence. What they built on manipulation now trembles without sound. What you built on faith now stands in quiet strength. And you don't need to explain how you got here. You don't need to prove your innocence or retell the story. Your healing is the story. Your grace is the evidence. Your peace is the answer to every unasked question, and they will see it. Not in one grand moment, but over time, as their plans fade, as their name dims, as the attention they craved shifts elsewhere. And all that remains is the reality they created, one that doesn't support them anymore. That's how God works, not with noise, but with reversal, not with chaos, but with justice. You rise with grace, they sink in silence, and the world may never notice, but heaven already has. You were never forgotten, not in your tears, not in your silence, not in the moments you questioned everything. God saw it all. The chaos they planted, the peace they destroyed, the confusion they cloaked as concern, and He never turned away. He watched, not with indifference, but with patience, waiting for the moment His justice would unfold. You walked through fire that wasn't yours. You bore burdens you didn't deserve. You stood in storms you didn't cause, but through it all, you didn't lose your soul. You held your heart. You preserved your faith. And in doing so, you aligned yourself with a kind of strength this world can't understand. Let the world think you were silent. Let them believe you were weak, because the truth is, you were never alone. The silence around you was sacred. It was where God was working. And while they built their comfort on your collapse, God was building your rise on their crumbling. Their chaos didn't kill you. It revealed you. Their betrayal didn't bury you. It birthed a version of you they never saw coming. And now, as their world begins to collapse, quietly, slowly, inevitably, you stand not in pride, but in peace, not in revenge, but in restoration. Because in the end, God always lifts the humble, He always heals the wounded, and He always answers the chaos with quiet justice. They created the storm, but you became the calm, and that calm, it was your victory all along.